He knew he was going to die at Troy. Not a suspicion, not a fear, a prophecy, spoken by his mother, before he was old enough to hold a sword. 2 paths, 1 long life, quiet, peaceful, completely forgotten. 1 short life, brutal, bloody, and immortal. He chose death, willingly, eyes open, and in the end, surrounded by the glory he traded everything for, he regretted it. This is not the story of the greatest warrior who ever lived. This is the story of what that cost him. Here is what we are covering. The goddess who tried to burn the mortality out of her own son, and what happened when she was interrupted. The one person Achilles loved more than glory, and how losing him turned the greatest warrior in history into something the gods feared. And the moment in the underworld when Achilles finally told the truth about everything he had chosen. Stay with this, because every version of this story you have seen leaves out the part that actually matters. Before Achilles, there was a problem. Thetis was a sea nymph, beautiful enough that both Zeus and Poseidon wanted her. Then a prophecy arrived. Any son born to Thetis would surpass his father in power. Both gods stopped, because both remembered exactly how they had come to power. Zeus had overthrown Cronus. Cronus had overthrown Uranus. Neither would risk fathering the being that ended them. So they decided. Thetis would marry a mortal. A mortal husband meant a mortal son who would die. They chose Pelion, king of Phthia, hero, entirely human. Thetis transformed to escape him, fire, water, lion, serpent. But Pelion had been warned by Chiron. Hold on. No matter what form she takes, he held on. And from that forced union came a child. They named him Achilles. The moment Thetis looked at her son, she knew 2 things. He was extraordinary, and he was going to die. She had children before Achilles, 6 of them. Each tested the same way, held in sacred fire, burning away the mortal parts while ambrosia preserved the divine. None survived. Achilles was further along than any of them when Pelion woke, saw his wife holding their infant in the flames, and snatched him away. Thetis walked back into the sea and never returned. In the version history remembers, she took her newborn to the banks of the river Styx, the boundary between the living and the dead. Anything it touched became invulnerable. She gripped him by the heel, dipped him in. The water covered everything, except the heel where her fingers held him. That one dry spot, that single point of contact between a mother and her child. That is where the arrow would find him 20 years later. Here is what nobody talks about when they talk about Achilles. He was not just trained to fight, he was trained to feel. Pelion sent his son to the centaur Chiron on Mount Pelion, who had also trained Heracles and Jason. Chiron fed the boy the marrow of lions and wolves, for what the Greeks believed those animals carried. Fearlessness, loyalty. He taught him to treat wounds, to play the lyre, to understand what honor cost. 2 paths, the long quiet life, or Troy. Achilles chose glory before he truly understood what death meant. Chiron let him, because in the world Chiron had built him for, it was the only choice worth making. When the Greeks came recruiting, Thetis hid her son disguised as a girl at the court of King Lycomedes. Odysseus found him, laid fabrics before the women with a sword hidden among them, then had soldiers shout the palace was under attack. Every woman ran. One reached for the sword. Achilles didn't resist. He had already made his choice. And at Troy, he was everything the prophecy promised. The Trojan army feared the sight of his armor on the horizon, but there was a flaw that had nothing to do with his heel. Achilles had built his entire identity on one thing, being recognized as the greatest, publicly, visibly. Take that away, and he didn't just get angry, he collapsed. Agamemnon took his war prize in front of the entire army, deliberately. The message was calculated. You may be the greatest warrior alive. I can still take what is yours. Achilles withdrew from everything. He sat in his tent while the Greeks died on the beach. While men he had fought beside were killed one by one. Ajax, Odysseus, His mentor Phoenix came with gifts and apologies. He refused all of it. A man who builds himself on public recognition cannot absorb a public humiliation and move forward. His pride kept him in that tent. Thousands of men paid for it. Then Patroclus came, his closest companion since childhood, the one person whose opinion he valued above every king in the Greek army. Patroclus didn't ask him to fight. He asked for something smaller. "Lend me your armor. Let the Trojans see it. Give the men something to believe in." Achilles agreed. One condition: advance only so far, then come back. Patroclus went. He went further than he was told. Hector found him and killed him, believing he was killing Achilles. When the news reached the tent, Achilles screamed loud enough that Thetis heard it from the bottom of the sea. What followed was not grief. Grief is passive. What took hold of Achilles the Greeks called menos, divine fury, the kind that removes the line between a man and a force of nature. He no longer fought for glory. He fought to find Hector. The next morning, Achilles returned, and what happened was not a war. It was a storm. The gods watched from Olympus and debated whether to intervene. Hector stayed outside the walls. His father begged. His mother begged. He stayed. They fought. Achilles killed him, then tied the body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy, every day, for days, while all of Troy watched. Zeus sent Hermes to guide Priam through the Greek lines. The king of Troy, old, alone, unarmed, knelt before the man who killed his son and kissed his hands. Achilles looked at Priam, and something inside him broke open. The two men wept, not as enemies, as two men who had each lost the person they loved most. Achilles returned the body, granted a truce for the funeral. The most terrifying warrior in the ancient world, capable of compassion at the exact moment you expected none. Paris fired the arrow. Apollo guided it. It found the heel, the one dry inch Thetis' fingers had covered. Achilles fell before the gates of Troy, exactly as the prophecy said, exactly as he had chosen. Eternal glory, secured, just as promised. But the story does not end there. Years later in the Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld and finds Achilles among the dead. Not the warrior, not the legend, a shadow barely holding the shape it once had. Odysseus speaks of his glory, how his name is still celebrated among the living. Achilles answers with the most devastating line in all of Greek mythology. "I would rather be the lowest servant among the living, ploughing the field of the poorest man in Greece, nameless, forgotten, than rule over all the dead, the man who chose death for glory, surrounded by that glory for eternity, and wanted none of it." Achilles knew what he was choosing. He was told. He was warned. He chose it anyway, and it was not enough, because glory belongs to the living who witness it, and Achilles was dead. So here is what I want you to think about. Was Achilles brave, or was he just a young man who didn't understand what death meant until he was already in it?